Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. My name is Mahmoud. I am a visual effects supervisor and head of studio for Pixelmondo's Eastern divisions. And I'm super excited to be here. As Rebecca mentioned, it's my second time, and it's amazing to see how fast the community is growing and the output that's coming from the fellowship program. It's mind blowing. So I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing all the short films. Just gonna share my screen really quick, and I will. Great. Um, so today, basically, it's going to be an overview about virtual production. We're going to talk about virtual scouting, virtual logistics, real-time previs, tech viz, stunt viz, virtual art department, and LED volumes. So as you all know, for the past 50 years, all movies, TV series have been using the same linear workflow where you start with your script, your story, you go through your art department, find your locations, build your sets, and then you actually shoot it. You go through post, do a little bit of back and forth, and then that's how you get your project. And we all know that going backwards is very, very expensive and sometimes impossible. And, time aside, sometimes the creative vision doesn't go through. So, the showrunners or the creators might start with one vision, but we end up with something completely different. And virtual production is changing that. So with virtual production, that traditional linear workflow turns into a more parallel and collaborative workflow where you start seeing everything, visualizing everything right from the beginning. So you can see the wardrobe, you can see the locations, you can see the action right from the beginning. You make decisions, you shoot it on the LED stage. If you can't shoot it on the LED stage, you push it through post, and then you can go back and forth, and every department basically work together in parallel. So it becomes this ecosystem that everyone's kind of collaborating. Our aha moment at Pixelmondo was years ago when we were working on one of the Fast and Furious movies. I believe it was 7 or 8, when we were working on this very comp-heavy sequence with a lot of green screen comps, and the array that we got for the background was not matching. So we decided to recreate all the backgrounds in Unreal Engine. We trained our lighters and compositors to use Unreal, and we created our backgrounds in real time, and we could render them in real time and basically comp them after. And this was our big aha moment that, there is something here, and we, started pushing the limit. So we're like, let's take the camera out. Let's, render all the windshield reflections. Let's do our interactive lighting in Unreal Engine. And again, this is really old. This is years ago when we started using Unreal for stuff like this. Obviously, besides that, we were doing a lot of previs and tech viz in Unreal Engine. But let's talk about location scouting. As you know, traditionally in a pre-COVID world, studios would send 20, 30 people to remote locations just to see if that location works for the project. That takes time, that is very expensive. Money aside, these days you just cannot send a lot of people to a remote location just to see if the environment's working or not. That's why the new norm is going to be something like this, some sort of virtual scouting. And just to give you an example, this is a real location in Budapest that we recreated in Unreal Engine just using Google Maps and GIS data. So no one went there, but we could share this with the client and say, okay, does this work? Can we park the trucks here? Video Village probably goes there. That way, we can shortlist, the number of environments we have. When this gets shortlisted, we send a very small crew to the real location and we scan it. So we do proper LiDAR scanning, drone survey, and create a very, very accurate geometry, which allows us to get everyone on a Zoom call, for example, or with VR headsets, iPads, anything. We can walk around, change the time of day using a physically accurate sun simulator. So the DP, for example, can say, oh, if we shoot at 7 a.m., the shadows are too long or too short, and so on and so forth. So we can answer a lot of the questions. In parallel, we can work with the art department. So if the art department says, we're going to shoot here, but we don't like the terrain. What if we add a forest back there? We can add a forest back there. What if we make the ground wet, add mud? Since everything's done in Unreal Engine, we can iterate a lot faster. So we constantly show things every week. get sign off, and by the time everything's approved, we know that that environment's ready for the LED wall if we decide to shoot this on the LED wall. If not, then it's just going to be traditional visual effects. As we're developing that background, we can start doing previs. So you can see that the background is work in progress, but we can start blocking the action. As we talk to the director, the question might come up that can we even shoot this practically on an LED stage? We can shoot this to the stunt department, and they can say, if you're shooting this on an LED stage, you would need a motion base or a hydraulic system this big. So basically, we go from environment build to previs and stunt vis all happening in parallel. Everything being in a game engine, obviously we can create everyone's avatar. So we can create the DP, the director, the visual effects supervisor. We can do rounds or dailies in the environment together, log in remotely. So what you see here is our virtual camera that we've created, for example, for one of our shows that allows everyone to kind of remote in. We give access to one driver, and that driver is kind of picking up the iPad. And we've created all common camera bodies because we don't want people to go and learn Unreal from scratch. For example, if a DP picks up an iPad, you bring up Sony Venice camera body, and you can kind of change the settings. You pick your lenses, production lenses that we've cataloged already. You pick your operator mode, which is drone, crane, Steadicam, so on and so forth. And then we can import any action. You pretty much go and start doing scouting on your own time or with the team, and you start kind of taking pictures, screenshots, or even hit record and do takes. So I'm just going to fast forward to here. This is just one take that the DP was just playing around with the iPad remotely. And this is a mocap that we shot in the office, which I will show you a little later. But you can see that quickly on a Zoom call, you can block the action. So, what if this happens? And let's look that way. Oh, the spaceship gets hit, so on and so forth. Now, the cool thing about this is a game engine. So one of the players in this level could be a full-time editor. So the editor does the playback. For example, the director says, can you play back again? We play it back. We can trim it. And at the end of the call, we can actually export an EDL for the actual editorial department. So this example here was done in 4 hours during COVID on a Zoom call with people logging from LA, the UK, and obviously Toronto. And no spoilers here. These are just, this was a practice run because we wanted to show how powerful this tool is. And you can see that traditionally, this type of previs with this kind of quality would take weeks, if not months. But once you set everything up, you can literally block stuff in a matter of hours. I'll show you another example from another show. Again, no spoilers. You might recognize some characters, but again, these are just demos. Doing previs in Unreal Engine allows you to budget things as well. So for example, if you're shooting this on real location, we can say, okay, is that explosion special effects or visual effects? The bullet hits, are we going to do that in post or are we going to do that later? This rooftop sequence, should we go to location and shoot the rooftop at the location, or should we do this whole rooftop part on an LED stage? So you start answering all these questions and start planning things. Another super cool thing you can do is to link audio, like real-time audio with, for example, the bullet hits. That way, every time you change the timing of the explosion or the bullet hits, the audio changes as well. So you can export that audio for the actual audio people, so they have the latest and the greatest timing. We use Xsens suits, for example. And as you all know, these suits, you don't need any cameras, wires, or sensors. You can literally go skydiving and hit a button and it records your motion. We can have a live link. So the director could be on a Zoom call and directing the stunt live. So we can see the actual avatar in the virtual world live, or we can do an offline record and then import it in the level and basically set up cameras after. And using our TechVis tools, we can say, if we decide to do a rooftop on an LED stage, we probably need a techno crane that's this big. The practical set would be this. So we can start planning our um, sets, basically, if we decide to shoot on an LED stage. Uh, just to talk about virtual logistics a little, it's not as sexy as all the other stuff that we're about to see, but line producers love this. So, for example, this is Pinewood Toronto, just a very low res version of Pinewood Toronto. We can actually go to different sound stages, bring up a virtual calendar, and can say, okay, what is happening on August 3rd, for example? And then it brings up the set, the crew that's going to be there, and the equipment that we need to have for that day. This was a request we got during COVID, mainly because of testing and zones. And again, in a studio space, it's easy, but imagine if you go into a remote location. First of all, you don't know where to park, you don't know where the COVID tent is. So with the right credentials, you log into a website, which is, again, takes you to this level. You can fly around, and with your credentials, you see particular things only related to you. So again, you find out where the COVID tent is, where you get tested. Hair and makeup is over here. So it's much better than a PDF that you get the night before and has a 2D map on it. So you can really visualize things in 3D, and everything being done in Unreal Engine. You can update things, and again, everything is real time. So if you need to do last minute changes, not a problem. You can do that. Let's talk about Virtual Art Department, or VAD. As we all know, traditionally, the art department, they use different pieces of software than visual effects. There's a lot of 2D work, concept work, and also a lot of work that's being done in Rhino, for example, or SketchUp. And usually, traditionally, when VFX gets these type of files, we usually just use them as reference, and we have to kind of rebuild them from scratch. Nowadays, with virtual production and virtual art department, we've created workflows that allows us to quickly import that SketchUp file into Unreal Engine. So that first week, we are already in there with a camera. We can change lenses and kind of see the environment. We work closely with the art department and start addressing some of their notes, and we start building on top of that environment. So we're adding some detail, constant feedback from the group, from the director, DPs, everyone have input. And then the week after, we have a little bit of texturing going. And at this point, we can start possibly doing some stunt or action that we can import into the scene. And after a few weeks, we can have an environment this good, which is really good for, again, previs, and we can start kind of blocking our shots. Now, this could be an environment that is made from scratch. So, for example, on Star Trek, we usually have a low-res version of the environment that allows us to kind of fly around and build the set for that particular sequence. And once we move stuff around, I'm just going to fast forward this. With the art department, we can do this through Zoom. People can be wearing VR headsets or just basically looking at monitors. We can kind of set up the set. And once we like how it looks, we pick our hotspots. Hotspot is the center of the volume, what lands inside of the volume. So this allows us to basically tell the art department that, okay, if the real camera sits in the middle of this yellow circle, that means everything within this circle needs to be built practically, and everything close to it needs to be pretty high res. So again, we quickly build the environment, pretty low res, we identify the hotspots, and then after that, we start up-resing the surroundings, and then give the art department what's within that, because they have to build that practically. Now, what if this wasn't a made-up location? What if this is a real location? This is St. James Theatre in Montreal that we scanned. We quickly did the set dressing. And for example, we jumped on a quick Zoom call with the art department, with the showrunners on the call. So, they would tell us that, can you make the curtains shorter, longer? What if they're red? So again, seeing this in real time and everyone seeing the same thing allowed us to kind of get to the final result a lot faster. And again, things don't have to be perfect right from the beginning. As I mentioned, we start very low res and constantly iterate and address the notes. So by the time we get to the final result. Everyone's seen it, everyone's happy with it, and it's basically signed off on. Once we have that, we do one final virtual walkthrough, if you want to call it. So we make sure that the set dressing's nice, everyone kind of likes the location things. And this is when we hand this off to the DPs. That way they get to play around with the lighting and come up with the mood of the scene. Again, this could be a real location, but they can visualize it before they actually go there. And once that's done, using some of the tools we've developed, we can actually create virtual LED walls and suggest a few options. We can basically say, instead of going to that location, what if we do this on an LED wall? And instead of building 400 chairs and 400 tables, for example, let's do this on an LED wall and only build 40 chairs and 40 tables. So again, right from the beginning, everyone can have the options, do the due diligence and see which way. Should we go to the real location or should we shoot this on a volume? And speaking of the volume, obviously all roads lead to that. As you know, the LED volumes are made out of just these LED panels that are roughly 0.5 meter by 0.5 meter, and they kind of stack on top of each other like Lego pieces. You can stack them from the ground up using a support structure like this, or you can fly them or hang them from a truss system. So they're obviously perfect for out the window, smaller things like this. This was our very, very first test years ago, which again, it was really promising. That's why we decided to kind of go and do bigger things. And obviously, you can build a big volume for more immersive setups. I'm sure everyone knows by now how it works, but I'm gonna quickly explain. So there is this imaginary point in space, or there's this imaginary 360 camera that projects the image on the volume usually from the center of the volume. And this 360 projection is only there for lighting and reflections. And using these sensors on top of the wall, the camera tracking sensors, we track the real camera, and that's how we get the real parallax, the dynamic parallax working. A lot of benefits, as we all know. So we get a lot of in-camera finals. You're not limited to, usually on a green screen shoot, the producer gives you a limit. You basically have, 15, 20, 25 shots only. But again, if everything's there already, you get a lot of in-camera finals. You get proper reflections and lighting, much better creative collaboration and communication, rapid lighting and changeovers, flexibility to improvise on set with live content, continuity of vision throughout post-production, and easy pickups and reshoots. Your environments literally live on a USB stick. So if you finish your show, you wrap, and later on decide to do some pickups, you literally go to another stage. Maybe you shoot your stuff in Toronto, and then you do your reshoots in LA. You plug in that environment, and then you get the exact same lighting scenario and setup. So reshoots are much easier. So you might say, okay, building volume should be easy, and unfortunately, you can see that every day there are posts online that a new volume is going up. It's great to see that, but only it needs to be done properly. So for example, there are a lot of examples with like one big wall behind the talent, and that is very challenging to make look good, because there is a very, very bright background, and you need a lot of practical lights on top and in front of the actor or the talent to make it look good, unless the actual setup is very backlit setup, or you're in a cave, or it's an interior shot with a lot of light coming in. Setups like this, great, but not enough real estate, so you can't really build practical sets, or you can't really walk around. So a proper volume should be bigger. And what you see here is the very first proper volume, which was used on The Mandalorian Season 1. For the most part, it worked really, really well. One of the biggest challenges was acoustics, believe it or not. So because of the perfect cylindrical shape, you would hear a lot of echo when you stand in the middle of this volume. Even if you whisper, you hear yourself. So it creates a lot of acoustics issues. That's why all of the new volumes that are going up around the world are, this shape, and they're roughly 75 feet in diameter, 90 feet deep, and 23 is on the lower side. Now the stages are like the wall height is 26 to 30 feet high. So again, you might say that's easy. Let's go to Alibaba and buy some LEDs. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And it's like saying, let's buy a Lamborghini, but without the engine. So building a volume has four very, very important components. One is the location. There is equipment that you use. There's the content that you put on the wall, and there's how you operate it, basically. And believe it or not, the hardest factor is location. It is very hard to find the right location for a big volume. You can build one from scratch, a soundstage. This takes years to get your permit, millions of dollars just to construct it, and just it takes too long. So nowadays, everyone's looking for retrofit, finding a warehouse type or an existing soundstage that you can convert to volume. And it's not as easy as just finding a big warehouse, because there are many factors that you have to be aware of. One is clear span. Obviously, you cannot have columns or pillars in the middle of volume. Ceiling height is very, very important. So if your volume has a wall that is 24, 25, or 26 feet high, you need an additional 10 to 15 feet on top of that, because you need to build a structure on top of that, a catwalk for the operators or the technicians to go up, fix panels and stuff like that. So ceiling height, very, very important. Ceiling weight capacity. For one of our stages in Toronto, just the LED ceiling itself is close to 29,000 pounds. It's really, really heavy. So most of the warehouses here, for example, the weight load is only good for like 2 snowstorms. So the building needs to be reinforced for stuff like this. Thick concrete floors, very, very important, just because there will be a lot of activity, a lot of vibration. And as you know, these OptiTrack cameras, or the motion capture cameras on top of the volume, they're very, very sensitive. So every time there is vibration, you have to recalibrate them. So having very thick concrete floors is very important. And obviously there is the LED wall that you don't want it to kind of vibrate and shift. Sufficient power. These LEDs suck up a lot of power. So you got to make sure the building has a substantial amount of power. Obviously it needs to be soundproof, and all the other stuff that comes with, a regular shoot, workshop space, parking, and so on and so forth. So just this list, finding a space that has all these check marks is very, very hard. As far as equipment, obviously there are tons of equipment, tons of small things, but the main components are obviously your the LED panels, your camera tracking system. There's the LED processors, and it's the server, the computers that basically compute the content or run the wall. As far as the LED panels, depending on what brand you use, they're typically all, the 0.5 meter by 0.5 meter squares, and they have 4 modules in front of them. So once you build your wall, if you have to replace one, you don't need to take out the entire square. You can actually pop out these modules, and you can kind of replace them like that. The frame stays there, even if you want to change all 4 of them, because obviously you don't want to tear down your wall and build it again. As far as wall tiles versus ceiling tiles, usually the ceiling tiles are different than the wall tiles, and that's because ceiling tiles are mainly used for lighting and reflection. So the resolution doesn't have to be as good as the wall panels, but the brightness needs to be a lot more. So in this case, we're using Rowe Black Pearl 2 V2s, which I will explain what that is in a second. And for the ceiling, we're using Carbon 5. The ceiling panels are 3 times brighter than the wall, And we don't really recommend the DPs kind of pointing the camera up and shooting the ceiling. But once in a while, if it actually goes in camera, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Just really quickly about this V2 we have here. On The Mandalorian, they used Black Pearl 2s, which worked really well, but it came with some limitations, and we were fortunate enough to be part of that show. So we did a lot of the cleanups, and we got to know a lot of the benefits, obviously, and a lot of the shortcomings. So when we work closely with Ro, we fixed some of those problems. And one really important thing was the masking between the pixels. Originally, they were shiny. So when you have your LED ceiling shining a light on the walls, it would lift the wall. So you would lose a lot of contrast on the wall. But all the new panels are matted uh, between the pixels, so you get a lot of contrast. And obviously, we changed a lot of other stuff that it really helped with the in-camera aspect of things. And again, a lot of people bring up this rusting effect. You've probably seen this in a lot of the behind the scenes from Mandalorian. This effect that it just falls off into black. This is just the angle of view, and that happens because these LED ceiling panels are made for outside, and they have this protective plastic edge between the pixels. It's for protecting them from tennis balls, birds, and stuff like that. And this is why when you look at it from an angle, you stop seeing the pixels. We fixed that now, so we've basically told the manufacturer to kind of shave these off. But again, this doesn't affect the lighting or anything. The ceiling needs to be very flexible because depending on the show, one DP might say he or she wants to use a lot of practical lights, or on another show they might want to use just the LEDs for lighting. And that's why, for example, on Star Trek Discovery, one of the two shows that we're working on, the DP loves having practical lights, and you can see we have a lot of practical lights in the middle of the volume, which increases the cleanup work later if the camera looks up. And then in the other show, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the DP really likes to use the LED ceiling. And again, this is just a personal preference. And as people learn how the technology works, I think it's just going to go more towards this full LED ceiling. It's really powerful. It's really responsive. Basically, this is just an old footage before we built the walls. We had just the ceiling, and you can see that you have full control over the ceiling, and the resolution is actually not bad when you shoot it through with a proper camera. Quickly talking about LED processors. LED processors are like traffic cops. So it's the processor that tells which content to be on which panel at what time. So roughly, you need multiple processors for a massive build. And the formula roughly is every 120 to 150 panels gets one LED processor. So if you have a very large stage that has close to 2,000 LED panels, then you need multiple processors. As far as camera tracking, there are multiple systems out there. There's Vicon, there's OptiTrack, InCam, Moises. So there's many of them, but there are two different types. One is inside out and outside in. For example, InCam is a device that sits on top of your camera and shoots outside, and which is not really good for volume work. It's good when you're outside on set and you want to see something live. But within the volume, we suggest outside in. So your trackers are sitting outside looking at the real camera, and they basically triangulate the real camera. At any particular millisecond, you need at least 3 of these to look at your camera, but 3 is obviously not enough. For a big build, we're looking at 50 to 60 cameras because you're going to have a lot of practical sets. There's going to be a lot of occlusion, and that's why you need multiple sensors looking for that real camera. On The Mandalorian Season 1, there was only one live camera, so they could track one live frustum, and B-Cam had a very long lens that would make the background very out of focus. So with the background out of focus, you don't really miss that parallax. Now we have two live frustrums, and now we can actually track two cameras simultaneously, and we have two separate frustrums. We just tell the DPs not to go on top of each other, and if they do, we have a priority system. They just need to tell us that cam A always composites on top of cam B. So if they accidentally go on top of each other, we know that the footage from cam A is good. Quickly talking about render nodes on a big volume, usually need close to 20 very high-end computers running dual GPUs. So for our first stage, we have 20 nodes running dual RTX 8000, so 40 GPUs in total. Our brand new stage in Vancouver, which is going to be bigger than the Toronto one, is going to use more, and the new A6000s. Just to show you the timeline, how the build goes, we usually create the ceiling on the floor, build the catwalk. Once that's completed, then we kind of raise it, lock it, and then start building the support structure for the wall. And once that's up, and again, there's a lot of work that goes through that because you got to make sure everything's level on the ground. And then we built this upper deck around the volume, because this gives everyone access to go up, do maintenance, take out panels, put practical lights there. So we built this structure around so you can actually go up and do stuff. And then we slowly bring in the actual LEDs and kind of slowly build the wall. Now, one thing to keep in mind, these LEDs come with big flight cases. And at some point we had this, what are we going to do now moment, because we brought in all the flight cases and realized that we don't have enough room to actually build the wall. So we had to bring these cases 500 tiles at a time, empty them, take the empties out, and bring in a new batch. So basically you need a whole new warehouse just to store your flight cases. They actually take a lot of space. One thing that wasn't in that timeline is the riser. A volume this big definitely requires some sort of a riser, either a permanent fixed one, or nowadays you can see that they're building motorized Lazy Susans, basically, so you can kind of turn the entire set. But having this riser is very, very important because it allows you to blend the practical world to the virtual world a lot easier. If this riser wasn't here, then you would see all this structure at the bottom of the LED. So here's a quick example. Obviously, I don't have the content on the wall, but you can see that if the virtual world was there, there is this overlapping because of the riser, which makes the blending a lot easier. And this riser usually needs to go all the way to the end of the soundstage, just because you have to bring in your sets. You have to kind of do all the set dressing there and roll them in. If your riser ends here, then you need some sort of a ramp, and it's going to be very difficult getting it up and down the ramp. So it's a big cost, but it's definitely worth it, and it saves a lot of time in the long run. And moving on to content, best practices for what you put on the LED walls is obviously collaborating with the art department from the beginning is very, very important. And we do that right now with the two shows we're working on. We constantly test things. So for example, they give us pieces of the floor. They'd be like, can you put this in front of the volume? See if is it too reflective? Is it reflective enough? So going back and forth with the art department from the beginning really, really helps. Real environment scans, if you're rebuilding real locations, or even if there are similar locations out there, we recommend that you go out and scan things because it just adds a lot to the realism. It's much better than building stuff from scratch. Parallax is your friend. Obviously, the whole stage, the whole point is to kind of move the camera, get that live parallax shift. So we always suggest constantly moving the camera. That really helps with selling the volume. Rich midtones, color values, and color values really helps. Low angle lights and overcast lights. The stage is like a big diffuse box, so it doesn't do sharp shadows. If you're doing a 12 o'clock, like noon, sunny day look, you cannot achieve that with the volume. You have to take out some panels either from the ceiling or top of the wall, put a 10K there or a very strong practical light, and that will get you that. But overall, the stage really works with low angle and overcast lighting scenarios. Dynamic backgrounds, some sort of movements, moving trees, a little bit of atmosphere, just moving things in the virtual world really helps. And repetition. So, for example, if there is a tent in the practical volume, having that a few of those in the virtual world, or having this fence, for example, going from practical to virtual, really helps with selling uh, the content, basically. And just to give you a little bit of timeline, how long it takes from going from a 2D concept to the actual shoot. Um, this typically, we would say 12 to 16 weeks for an environment, depending on how complex it is, obviously. But it usually takes 12 to 16 weeks for one environment from 2D to the actual principal photography. Once we get the filmscape or the 2D concept from the art department, we quickly go through what we call rapid prototyping, which is our VAD basically recreates the 2D concept in Unreal Engine, just quickly putting it together, jump on a call with the production designer, DP, director, everyone, just to make sure we're on the right track and we're doing the right thing. Once we get a sign off from that, we start modeling it and we start texturing it. And one thing we've noticed is that, in the beginning of Star Trek Discovery, when we were working with the wall, we were doing a lot of our approvals on a Zoom call on our monitors. So the client would approve something on a Zoom call, and then when we would go on the stage, it would look completely different. That's why now we have these milestones that when we have a work in progress model, we just go to the stage, we do the layout, on the stage looking through the camera, because it looks completely different once it goes through the camera, goes through the lens, hits the sensor. It looks completely different. So we have these milestones and camera test days that we constantly do. We take notes, address the notes, and go to the stage again. We do final touch-ups and blending. We kind of lock it, we bake it, do one more camera test, and then we shoot the final thing. And based on our experience, we've come up with like the 10 commandments for VAD and what works and what doesn't work. For example, reflective surfaces. If you have reflective surfaces within the volume, that's fine, but have it inside the volume. Don't have it, close to the edge where you have to blend. Also, having reflective surfaces in the virtual world very close to the practical world is not good. An example would be having a mirror in the virtual world is bad, because imagine your actor is walking really close to the edge, and we don't see that actor in that reflective mirror. Or if you have really reflective objects in the virtual world really close, it's not going to reflect the practical world. So we suggest that either make things a little more diffuse, or up the roughness so things get a little blurry, or push the reflective stuff back in the midground and far background in the virtual world. The transition from practical to virtual, we always suggest to production designers to design a seam. Either, let's be on a platform looking down, or if we have to blend, let's have some boulders, rubbles, just try to mask and have some sort of a barrier. If not, it's still possible to do a seamless transition, but we need an additional 2 to 3 days extra for the blending. So in order to speed things up, it's always good to incorporate some of that seam or division in the design. Assets that exist in the virtual and practical set. Sometimes, as I mentioned in the previous slide, if there is a tent in the practical world and we have to rebuild that in the virtual, we have to decide who builds that first. Is it the visual effects company that builds it gives the model to the art department and rebuild it, or they build the practical one and then the VFX company scans it and rebuilds it. So that really depends on the schedule, but it's always better to have the practical one, scan it, and match it to that. Environment lighting, again, you can have any type of lighting in the virtual world. That you can even have very harsh sunlight, but try to keep your volume, the practical section, in shadow. So even if it's a sunny day outside, try to have, a big object casting a shadow on into your volume. So keep the volume kind of overcast, because as I mentioned, it's really hard to get harsh lighting or sharp shadows. But again, if you really have to do it, that's also possible. Animated lighting on Star Trek, we have dynamic lights, and obviously the DP and director, they really want to have control. So knowing what's dynamic and what's baked in advance is very, very important, because of the performance, we have to bake a lot of things. But if we can't, then we need to know which light's going to be dynamic in advance, so we can kind of optimize the scene based on that. Frame rates, currently we can only shoot 48 frames per second on the volume. We're trying to go higher, especially for action sequences. If you want to go, shoot slow mo, or with a fire like a 120, that's not possible right now. We can do 48 frames per second. So again, that's something that we tell everyone in advance, so they're aware. Real world locations, I talked about this. So if you can scan real world locations, that would be great. Compute resources, again, this is all these points are similar to each other. So in order to be able to optimize the level and play it at 24 frames per second or 48 frames per second on the wall, we need to make sure that things are optimized. And for example, animated objects, if there's a crowd in the virtual world, we suggest to add that later. Since we're tracking the camera, we already have the tracking data. Why not add that later as a post? Or heavy effects elements. If it's about some atmospheric stuff, not a problem. We can put that on the wall. That's not too heavy computational wise. But again, if there are tons of explosions and we want to trigger them and have them happen at a particular time, we always suggest to kind of do these later in post. Lastly, as far as operations, we have a few roaming iPads that we give to the director, the DP, and they can kind of do simple things, rotate the sky and stuff like that. To be very honest, it's a little gimmicky, and no one's kind of using them right now. So mostly everything goes through Mondo Bar, we call it, but it's the brain bar. And whatever change that happens, either with the iPads or the big workstations, it goes through our render nodes, and then it gets displayed on the volume. And as far as hierarchy on set, we have the director, the DP, and visual effects supervisor. Usually they're the ones kind of talking to each other. If there is anything VP related, there is a virtual production supervisor in the back that could communicate with the team. If it's a blending issue, let's say something's not blending right, the VP soup usually talks to our colorist, which is usually a lighter or a compositor who's trained in Unreal Engine, so they can quickly, create a volume or, Bezier or Roto, if you want to call it, color correct things and match things a little better. If it's a bigger change, it goes through our scene operators. So scene operators are the ones that are keeping track of the performance of the wall, making sure that the orientation is correct, the 360 projection is correct. And if, the DP wants emissive shapes for lighting, they can put them on, and so on and so forth. Our mocap operator, again, keeps track of the tracking data. Every take we record it and we pass it on to our VFX team later on, because we can, if we have to extend the volume or paint something out or add something to the volume, then that mocap data is very, very helpful. We have a stage manager just to make sure everything's going smoothly, and that's usually what happens on a big set. And that's pretty much it. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Oh my goodness, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. That was great. Thank you. Well, I think we have a question from Spencer right off the bat.
Yeah, hi. So UE4 has so many different capabilities, but not everything is like ready to go out of the box. So a lot of things need to be put together, developed. You showed an example of the theater in Montreal, and like during the previs with the art department, you showed how quickly you could like customize curtain length, color, etc., that kind of stuff. So like, how do you go about identifying what tools or functionality you might need for a virtual production shoot, specifically when you're like working with, I guess, your clients, or like what is that process like? How do you figure out the tools that you'll need, or do you already have them already kind of like figured out beforehand?
In advance, we talked to the art department and the production designer. So we basically, before the call, there is an agenda that today we're going to talk about this room, or it's all about the curtain. So we have an agenda, and based on that, we're going to create tools in advance, and that's why we can kind of have everything ready. So we get those questions answered, and then the next session could be about the second floor, or other things. So having that communication with the art department and the production designer is very, very helpful. And if there is something that we cannot address on the call, we take notes. We do the notes, and then allow them to kind of log back into the level, and they can kind of see it themselves and give us notes later.
Cool, thanks.
Doug.
Hi. First of all, I was wondering what brand of LED boards are you using?
Row panels.
Row panels. Yeah, I was on the early crews of doing that for sports, like putting the boards around soccer fields and stuff. And back then they were very, very heavy. They started getting lighter, but back then, like a panel of 4 was like 300 pounds. How heavy are they now?
I don't have the exact number, but not so heavy. So you can easily take them out of the box and stack them on top. So if you go to the website, they have all the specs, but definitely not very, very heavy.
Yeah. That looked really cool. I liked how you had the like on the app where you could tell the location and like where the trucks were going to be and everything. Because when I worked in production and when I worked on like music festivals and stuff, that's always like, okay, where do I park? How do I get from parking to where I'm going? Where's the bathrooms? All that basic stuff. Like you waste a lot of time with that, So that was like a very, very nice solution to just have it like right there, ready to go and see where it was based on your pass or whatever. So I like that a lot. It was very cool.
Awesome. Got a question from Dave.
Hi. There's a lot of data moving back and forth when you're shooting. How do you deal with making sure everything's in sync and reducing latency?
This is on the stage or from stage to the office?
On stage.
On stage, again, the network set up in a way that can handle the traffic. We've done a lot of stress tests and made sure that the wiring and the networking is done in a way that can handle that kind of traffic. And again, from the stage to the office, we have a dedicated line. So if you have to make a change, a much bigger change to the environment, all of our artists are sitting in the office, they can do the change and kind of push it back to the stage. So again, we've done proper wiring and networking within the stage and from the stage to the office.
And then I imagine there's sort of synchronous between Unreal, between what are you using, end screens or end display or something like that, or for distributing the pictures on screen?
I'm not sure if I got the question. Sorry.
So so synchronism between the displays, between the camera, between the frustum, between what's. So how are you working that?
It's basically based on end display, but we have our in-house. We've heavily modified Unreal. We have our own internal build, that allows us to basically do all that. But it's based on endless.
We've got a question from Mark. I'm sorry, that was Mark. Spencer again.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're currently doing 48 frames per second. Is really the current fastest you could do? Is that limitation because of hardware, and if so, which hardware?
It is because of the LEDs, but right now, again, for our new stage, we're doing a test with 120 frames per second, and I'm told that it's looking pretty promising. So there might be a solution for a higher frame. But yeah, the current limitation is 48, and that's because of the LED hardware.
Cool.
Altan.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. I was just wondering if the moire effect is something that causes a lot of trouble. And as a second question, I was wondering what type of people are Pixamondo looking out for in terms of for their creative experience for hiring for these types of positions now that the industry has sort of grown that direction?
As far as the moire, I think a lot of people say, oh, LEDs, they come with moire. If the right type of LED panel is being used, you rarely get moire, especially if you don't focus on the LEDs. You can even be pretty close. You can be 2-3 feet away from the wall, and if you're not focusing on the LED panel, you never get moire. Obviously, it helps if you're using a camera that has a large sensor. So, for example, any LF, LF really helps. So the bigger the sensor, the better. But I can easily say less than 5% of what we shoot, you once in a while catch a moire, and that's basically you can correct it by, slightly adjust the focus. Regarding the jobs, we're pretty much looking for everything right now from content creation to as far as environment builds to previs in Unreal to asset build to everything basically on the content creation side we're looking for. Also, we're looking for personnel for the stage. So we're looking for Unreal operators who can drive the stage, motion capture technicians, PMs, basically on the creative side and on the operation side. We're looking in Toronto and Vancouver, and soon elsewhere, which we will announce very soon.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. I appreciate it.
No problem.
A nice little side topic. That's a great question. I have a question here from Christopher.
Dude, Mahmoud, Unreal presentation. Incredibly impressed with your expertise, and you come across as not only being very comprehensive, but also practical. So given your hands-on experience with the volume wall and the client interaction around it, like you spoke about dealing with filmmakers, where do you see volume walls failing today in front of clients and directors? Where do they kind of hit friction points that they can't get by or can't deal with and choose to go more practically? And then second question is, where do you see virtual production technology going in the next 5 years, given the hands-on experience that you have?
Obviously, I want to give credit to the whole team. I mean, there's an army working on stuff, so I mean, all the credit goes to those guys. But as far as the biggest frustration on set, I think it's because of lack of prep and us having to educate everyone that shooting on the volume, if we want it to be successful, we got to do a lot of prep, and whatever we come up with, we got to stick to it. I mean, we spend a lot of time, for example, building the environments, doing the lighting. We can't just show up on set and then all of a sudden be like, let's, switch things around. So it's that educating the market right now is the most challenging thing. I would say a lot of times some of the DPs, they want to take the camera way outside of the volume. So for example, we have full tracking within the volume, but they want to have a massive techno crane like flying into the volume, and explaining that there is a limitation to tracking right now. We can only track 10, 20, maybe 15 feet outside the volume, but after that tracking fails. So that's one thing that we're trying to see if we can kind of extend the camera tracking outside. But as far as future of virtual production. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think I can see shooting on multiple stages simultaneously. For example, if you have a motion control, you could have one actor in LA, the other actor, for example, in Toronto. One could have a green frustrum. The feed from one could be on the other stage. Again, these are the things that we're testing, and we're hoping that we can show some stuff. But I think this is just the beginning, and this technology is here to stay, and it's just going to get bigger and better.
Awesome response, Mahmoud. Thank you.
Okay.
Pavan.
Thank you, Bob. It's great. I had a few questions like, what's the max weight for the 3D tracking? And
The max.
Yeah, and do you do any practical effects, and how would you do like a drone shot?
Very good question. So as far as max speed, as far as panning the camera, you can go as fast as you want, as long as you make your frustrum big enough, because you give yourself a little bit of overscan, if you want to call it. So doing pans not a problem. What we have problem with is like really fast boom shots. So if you're on a techno crane and you come down really fast, you see a little bit of delay or a little bit of bounce with the background. But again, 95, 98% of the shots we do, it holds up. There is barely any latency. The latency, I would say, is probably, down to like 3 to 4 frames, which it's not noticeable. And we have 2 Steadicam operators, very handheld, and both frustrums kind of holding up. So the only limitation with fast camera moves is the very fast boom shot down. And your second question about practical effects, we suggest pumping in atmosphere in the physical world, because that really gets diffused with the lighting. It really marries the two worlds together. We've had smoke, we've had fire, controlled fire within the volume. Looks great because of all that heat distortion that kind of distorts the LED wall. Water, we've had pouring water in front of the camera, and we've had obviously puddles of water within the volume, but we haven't had like pouring rain, and we never kind of, so that's been our experience with practical effects.
Like, how do you do a drone shot which zooms out from a long shot?
Drone, obviously, if you really want to have a drone, you got to have a tracker on the drone, so the sensors can kind of track your drone. But we suggest a techno crane. So if you can have a very long techno crane.
Sure. Is one last question. Is the base ever revolving? Can you rotate it like the huge?
Our fair stage not, but again,
Okay.
a very famous stage, London, it has a lazy suit, and that's not necessarily a good thing. You got to see if that works for your production. That's a decision that the production designer needs to make, because it also creates a lot of problems for you.
Okay. Thank you.
But having the
Thank you so
riser
much.
is very, very important.
Yeah, I saw that. It's really great. Thank you.
No problem.
Next up, Reed has a question.
I'm sorry, I was still muted. Thanks a lot. It was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and I've watched a mountain of these presentations by different people, and this was very informative. But I have a question. I teach visual effects and animation and game design and stuff. I've been using Unreal for quite a while, for mostly game work. But starting this year, I'm going to be working on developing a volume of sorts. So, and I'm wondering if you're thinking of how you might build one for a modest university course, what would be your kind of approach to do that?
It really depends on the budget, because based on that you can kind of decide if you want to go big with the height, or you want to have some flaps or front lighting. Do you have extra budget for practical lights? There are many factors. and what are you going to use for camera tracking? If it has to be a Vive system, if there is not enough budget for like OptiTrack or Vicon, then yeah, it basically it all comes down to budget. And I can later on feel free to send me an email, and I can go back and forth with you and kind of suggest a few things.
Thank you. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
We are using a Vive controller from the Valve, from the Index.
Right.
On the camera. So again, it's not outside in. It's inside out. It's what we got.
But which is great for educational purposes. That's great.
Thanks.
No
I'll contact you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Very cool. Question from Juan.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. Now, I got two questions. One is, how long are the days when, I know that it helps a lot now working directly on the volume, because you have that lighting that you have for a longer period of time. How long are the shots, and how many of that, what is the percentage of the shot that they don't have the final picture that you have to go on post and work it out? And how is the approach of the client when he knows or he realizes in some point that they need the post-production pipeline to finish some of the shots?
These are very, very good questions. So as far as your first question about how long does it take, we've had really good experiences that, at the end of the day, we still have 2 hours left, and the AD yells that we're done, we have 2 hours, keep shooting. So they start being creative and try to do more coverage. So as far as if everything works and if there are no surprises, no crashes, we usually finish faster than traditionally, and we can do more. But there are occasional crashes here and there that we have to factor in. As far as percentage of shots that require some sort of either cleaning, let's say we look up, we see some of those practical lights, or we're way too far out and we see the edge of the stage, or the client basically, they budget for those. And right now I can easily say probably from 5 to 8% of what we shoot requires either cleaning or that they want to extend the volume. And that could be really minor stuff. Like, as I mentioned, we have A cam and B cam tracking simultaneously, and there are two different frustrums on the wall. What if they want to use footage from B cam, but B cam's under A cam? So that means we in post, we have to clean that. But the great thing is we are tracking these two cameras. We have camera tracking data. We have the real environment in Unreal Engine. It's literally like plug in the camera, take it to the Unreal Engine, render a clean plate, get the compers to kind of that in. It's not as easy as just reveal. There is obviously the real elements, the atmosphere within the volume. So there will be a little bit of color correction, but you don't have to track things from scratch.
That includes, are they jumping on Nuke directly, or they use a proprietary, or they do it directly on Unreal?
For which one? Sorry.
For the comping, when they have to finish and clean it. And
it's basically your traditional visual effects program. So in Nuke, basically you get your plates and you basically
clean it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
No problem.
I believe Jorg has a question.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud. It was a very nice presentation. The thing I'm wondering about is I attended the American Society's workshop on this a few weeks ago, and it seemed there the consensus was, shooting large sensors, DLF, and shooting lenses that are not so sharp. Based on your experience, do you have any lens set recommendations? What lenses are most often used?
Great question. We've done a whole test with different lens kits. I know on Star Trek, both Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds, we're using anamorphic Cook. I can actually send you what they picked, but I know there was a shoot off. They went and tested lens packages and picked one that worked perfectly. So I can provide that later.
That would be great if you could send that. That would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And we can definitely post that somewhere if you'd like later. Now we have a question from Wolfie.
Thank you.
Mahmoud, thank you so much. There's this deep hunger for knowledge on all of these matters floating around. I'm a cinematographer in Los Angeles. I'm shooting a commercial, car commercial after the fellowship ends on a video wall. And I'm also doing a bunch of different I've done a couple shoots on the wall, all of that. Hey, I had a question. How much do you think Unreal 5 is going to be a game changer for the quality of photorealism for the backgrounds?
Obviously, it's going to be a huge change, but it's not going to be overnight. It takes time. Like a lot of the features for virtual production that are going to be in Unreal 5, as far as I know, are already available. But as far as quality, yes, it's going to be a huge jump, but again, it won't be an overnight. You still need to optimize your assets. You still need to make sure they're ready for the wall, because you might have something on your monitor that looks great, but as soon as you put it on the wall, look at it through the camera, it looks completely different. So right now we're obviously doing everything we can with 4.27, but can't wait till 5 is production ready, and so we can kind of use it on the wall.
Cool. One note to the thing. Do you have 2 thrustums going at the same time, or you just have 1 camera system?
We have 2, and now the DP on Star Trek's asking for 3. We can do 3, but our warning to the DP is that they just got to make sure they keep them away from each other, but we have the ability to track 3 cameras simultaneously.
That's great. One of the hacks that I ran into was the wall I was shooting on the last project. We were shooting 2 cameras, and I was on a tighter lens, and what I ended up doing is I couldn't move. It was blurring out, and I had a guy pulling up a watch. What I did was I camped the other guy's shot. So if you have to go really fast, you use the other thrustrum to park it, and then I could get the fast pan. So that's a good cheat if you haven't encountered that.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Awesome. And then, it would be great if, I'd love to link to whatever data you put out about video walls or videos or anything. I'd love to subscribe to your newsletter.
Yeah, no problem. And again, we have a whole cheat sheet that I will share with everyone, just, what works, what doesn't, very basic stuff, but it's, so I will share that with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the answers to the questions.
No problem.
I know we're a little tiny bit over, but do you have time, do you think, for we have three more questions, I think?
Yes, no problem.
Next up, Ben.
Thank you for the presentation. Several of us here are also educators, so we're actually going to be training the next generation of Unreal users, especially for our LEDs and virtual production. What do you think that we should focus on, making sure not just the core of Unreal, but what are the things that we should prepare our students for or emphasize to teach them, whether it's blueprint, whether it's animation, visual effects within it, or cross platforms?
Right now, I would say there's a shortage of just technical Unreal artists. So if you can work on and focus on just photoreal environment builds that would perform on the wall. So, first teach how to create realistic environments, and then teach how to optimize these so they can perform 24 or 45 frames per second to go on the wall. That's, I would say, focus on that. When it comes to hardware, how to operate these stages, that would come later, and hopefully we can help with that. That we're going to put out videos that we can share with all schools and universities. But I would say right now there is just a shortage of artists for building these environments.
That's great advice. And I'm sure there's a lot of teachers here who are in this group who are really interested in that piece of advice. That's great. Next up, Norbert.
Yeah, thank you for this really great talk. I have somehow the same question as Ben, but more in the sense of what we should teach classical directors or DOPs at school. We have a classical film school with DOPs and directors. What kind of the 5 most questions you hear from people who don't have experience with virtual production on an LED stage?
It's I would say it's the prep time, like really teaching everyone that, you know, we gotta spend time on the prep, and if we do that, the results will be fantastic. So really get them familiar with scouting, virtual scouting, or lighting your scene within Unreal Engine. So get the DP in the virtual world, say, you know, this is how it works. We can operate it for you, or learn Unreal and start putting your lights. Once they get familiar with this, they can kind of lock the scene much faster. And when they go to the wall, everyone speaks the same language. So again, we had this problem in the beginning of Star Trek, but now everyone speaks the same language. Everyone understands that, oh, once we pass this milestone, that means we cannot touch the layout. Like we can't change the mountains, but now we can change the lighting. Once we pass the milestone for lighting, oh, you know, we can only talk about blending now. So it's that, you know, the workflow, or the you know, teaching them that is, I would say, yeah, it's key. And in the beginning, for example, for Star Trek, we were supposed to do 8 environments only on the wall, and now we're up to 40 plus environments. It's, you know, in less than a year, they realized that, you know, this is working. So let's just, you know, design our sets for the wall. Even writers are involved now. The writers are writing with the wall in mind, knowing that, okay, the wall can do this, it can't do that, so let's not have this type of explosion, but so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
It's fascinating that the writers have to think differently as well. That's great. We have a question from Sinan.
Thank you for your time, Mahmoud. Appreciate it. It was a great presentation. So I've been working on a couple virtual productions for the past year on LED walls specifically, but mostly shorts and commercial work, not featured yet. So you guys on The Mandalorian 1, I believe it was about 30-ish% of the in-camera footage was actually used in the final footage, and the rest needed to go to post. You know, but again, that was, I believe that was the first major project maybe on LED walls. So as you guys learned from one project to another, how did that improve or not? If you can share some of that.
No, absolutely. So first off, I don't want to take, like, Pixel was not involved with the stage side of The Mandalorian. So we did a lot of post work. We had a lot of traditional visual effects, which includes some of the you know, doing extra work on the wall, so that all the credit goes to ILM and Epic, obviously. But for Star Trek, again, we started thinking that we're only going to do like probably 10%, and now we're over 60%. So 60% of the environments are all virtual, and now more shows are being greenlit with this in mind, saying that, you know, we were already thinking of building another stage in Toronto, just because our 2 stages in Toronto cannot support these shows. So we're being asked to, you know, how quickly can you build another stage, because, you know, we have more shows coming. So I think everything's going in that direction. And just so you know, it's some other shows are being very creative. For example, there are directors that are still a little nervous about the results, but they still want to use virtual production. And for example, on one show that we're involved with, they want to build the environments to a 60%-ish level. They want to use it for lighting and reflections. And we're always using with the green frustum. And that allows us to take that 60% environment to final, and then we do a traditional comp. We still have the camera tracks, we still have proper lighting, but again, a lot of shows are being creative with this.
Appreciate you, thanks.
Awesome.
Pavan.
Yep, sorry, I'm back with a question. So is there like a limit to the resolution of the wall, in terms like if you can use 3 cameras, 4 cameras at a single time?
It's the compute, like, it's basically, you know, you need more nodes to be able to render these high-res frustrums. But obviously the LEDs themselves, there is a resolution to them, and you can go with a lower pixel pitch. Right now we're using the Black Pearls, which is 2.84, but you can go 2.6, you can go 1 point something. But we've done a lot of tests, and the ideal number right now is 2.8, because by the time everything hits the lens, goes through hits the sensor, we think that even if you go 2.6, you need to create or render more content per pixel. So you need much faster computers for something that's not really visible. In our opinion, we've done a lot of tests. So we think right now 2.84 is still the ideal resolution for the LEDs. And as far as the frustrations, you just need more computer power to be able to see them.
You would be shooting them on 8K or the IVs and stuff, but you're taking 2.8 as your final.
We haven't done 8K. We've done 6K, which has been okay, but all of our shows right now, they're 4K shows.
Okay. And one last question.
Yeah.
Are you, like you showed me the Fast and Furious one, was any of the compositing done using Composure directly inside Unreal?
No, that was all traditional Nuke. And again, that was years ago when we just rendered the background in Unreal, gave it to our compers, and they just did a traditional comp.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Okay. We got two final questions, and then once I'll cut it off there. But we have Rahan and then David.
Hi, Mahmoud. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. We did an LED wall demo at Bournemouth University here over the summer, and learned some really good lessons, as you're saying, testing stuff out. I was just wondering, you mentioned working with 2 cameras and now incorporating 3. In terms of reflections, how does that work because of the multiple frustrums casting reflections on the practical elements in the scene?
That is a great question. And again, if your character is like a Mandalorian, which is like a walking chrome ball, that would be an issue because you constantly something else moving. And unfortunately, I've seen this on a lot of the smaller LEDs examples online, that they open up the frustrum so much that the entire world is rotating around the character. So luckily for us, the frustrum, we keep the frustrum pretty tight to what the camera sees. And usually, we haven't done 3. We're being asked to do 3, but we have the ability. But it's been 2 cameras, and it's an AV, just a dialogue between 2 characters or a simple walk and talk. So we haven't, the movement hasn't been crazy enough to kind of get that light interaction.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. So the last question goes to David.
Hey, thanks a lot. Great information. So I've done a lot of scanning on sets for integration and for VR, even where it has to be capture everything photoreal and whatnot. I'm just wondering, do you think as scanning is getting a bit more attainable and cheaper, and the results with photogrammetry getting a lot better with the texturing and all that, that even some sets and shoots that don't think that they're going to do a virtual production would just scan their set whilst it's built as a backup in case they want to do pickups later or something happens? Or they just, don't want to do all their shoots on as many shoot days, and then they can just shove some of it to a virtual set. Is that kind of a market opening up more, or is that kind of more viable?
Absolutely. And I think this is going to be a new thing, that any set that's, before it gets turned down, I think it's just going to be a check mark that is it scanned? Is it?
Because it should just be a line item, in my opinion, for the cost
exactly.
these days. It's like I've worked on so many shoots, and then it's only after they get to the edit, they realize they're missing so many shots. And then I show them the scans I've got with all the texture, and they realize that at that time it was blue screen, but even just having with that even was enough to save them without having to go and try to do something for a reshoot.
Absolutely. It's like archiving or backing up your work. Like I think
exactly
everyone's going to ask for a copy of their set.
You think they would even be able to work a deal with a bond company, and it would actually make them save the money on that just as an insurance policy for what happens if something goes wrong.
Absolutely. Sure.
All right. We have one last question if you're able.
Yeah, no problem.
Johnny Benta.
Hi, I would like to go off of that last question just a little bit about scanning. And ILM originally said that their best work came from things that started off practically, and they would scan and rebuild and make proper LODs and so forth. How much of that has been true in your case, or are you guys making stuff from complete scratch, or are you sampling reality and bringing it in more often?
That's very true, and we always say if there is something similar out there that you can scan, we always suggest that. We've also done some miniature stuff. So one of our sets on Star Trek, we actually built a miniature, scanned it, and added more detail in Unreal Engine and use that. But yeah, absolutely, if you can scan stuff and use data from the real world, definitely recommend.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. I wanted to thank you very much for coming to visit us and for this great talk. And thanks so much for your patience in answering every question. Someone is asking in the chat about your contact information. If somebody wants more information, is there a way for them to ask the question?
My LinkedIn, you can add me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put my email in chat, so you can email me anytime. There we go.
Thank you. And I guess you mentioned an info sheet, and I can post that for everybody.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, Rebecca, and then
okay.
If you don't mind sharing.
I'll just post it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. This was fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Great job.
Absolutely brilliant. Well done.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Good luck on your next projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.